There we go. Do I really not have internet? Okay, we're good. There you go.
It's loading. Oh gosh, this is awful. Oh, excuse me for the audio person who's mixing this. Oh god.
Is that, there we go. Oh my god.
It is okay. I will.
You got it?
Spoilers, don't look. Okay, hello, it's me, the main event. My name is Jin. This is my presentation that you've all come here for. If you've come to the wrong room, I'm sure this will be useful information for you, hopefully. So yeah, breaking into the industry, or subtitled, Things I Wish I Knew When Attempting to Get into the Industry. So why the hell should you trust me? This random dude up here. Well, I've had now about 7 years of industry experience at this point. I had a very stereotypical climb into my current job. Started my first year in the industry as a playtester working at Robot. I then moved into QA there, which then led me into getting a job as a designer. That project got canceled, and so they laid off a bunch of people there. And that got me picked up by Gearbox. So, you know, silver linings there. Worked at Gearbox for about 3.5 years as a designer. And I am currently working fully remote at a Seattle company as a senior mission designer called High-Wire. Couple of things you might know. OMDU, you might not know that one actually. Lasted like half a year before it got canceled, unfortunately. Loved the game, but you know, things happen. Worked as a playtester on that initially, moved on to QA. Things you might know, Borderlands 3, worked as a mission designer on that. You might know me for if you've played it, I did the main mission with the mansion, along with the one where you fight Aurelia and the vault boss afterwards. I worked on the mission where you first meet Maya, and then I did a bunch of side missions within that as well. I worked on the DLC, Bounty of Blood. Worked on the very final mission for that, along with a bunch of side missions. Tiny Tina's Wonderland, worked on the final mission for that as well. Really, really great at getting those jobs at the final things that people are gonna see. Worked on a bunch of side missions for that as well. And currently working on a military documentary game called 6 Days in Fallujah at High-Wire. So, huge reason why y'all are all here. How do I get a job? And it's hard. You're gonna ask 30 different people, 30 different veterans, they're gonna tell you 30 different things. And it's just gonna depend on the time they went into the company, their experiences at a company. Overarching, AAA is so different from indie. The skill sets you're gonna need are different. So it's hard to give you specifics. But I've showed this off to a couple of my industry friends, and we all generally agree that this is correct. So this is what I call a story of 3 bars, which you might have seen the spoilers for that a little earlier. So the 3 bars. I see getting a job in the industry kind of like an RPG, which is very apt considering where I work. You have skills and you need other skills in order to make up for skills that you lack, basically. And those 3 skills that I personally think are actual technical skills and experience, industry experience specifically, social skills, and then luck, which is very unfortunate, but it is a huge factor. So very much like an RPG, you got a lot of skills and experience. You don't really need to have a lot of social skills. You don't really need a lot of luck. If you're a little lacking in your skills and experience, hey, make it up with your social skills and a little luck as well. And hell, if you have a lot of luck, you don't need much in the other sets. As you notice, you still need a little, because once you get the job, you need to prove that you can do the job. But the process of getting in is a little easier. So what do I mean by skills, right? Like, such a generic term. So the hardest thing and the most important thing for you to get is industry knowledge. And you just don't work in the industry, so how do you know, right? These are gonna be things like, do you understand what is realistic when it comes to a project? Like, if I got just say like for Borderlands, I'm interviewing some for Borderlands 3. They give me a design doc, and their design pitch is like, I have this mission, and we're going to use a jetpack to fly across the sky to this top of the level, and we're going to see 3 people like dancing together, arms locked. I will immediately go like, this person has no idea what they're doing. I cannot trust them. And the reasons for this is Borderlands 3 doesn't have a jetpack. That's going to require animation. That's going to require code support. That's going to require a whole new mechanic. That's going to require level design, because we don't have verticality in Borderlands 3. That to me tells me that you don't understand how everything connects within the industry. And that's going to be a key point when you're interviewing with interviewers, with other design people. They're going to look for that. They're going to be like, do you understand what is realistic when you pitch things? Of course, if they ask you to do something which is called blue sky, which is you just concept things without any, what's the word I'm looking for? Like constraints, that's a different story. But if you're going to interview, specifically if I'm talking about a designer, code and art have their own interview processes. But if I was going to get a design pitch from a designer, that would be a key point that I'd be looking for. Like, do you understand what's realistic? Terminology, that's pretty self-explanatory. Things like blue sky, grokking something, code and art have their own terminologies, which unfortunately, I just don't know. I'm sorry. But it's a lot easier to find this kind of stuff, especially with dev blogs. A lot of companies like to throw out like devs talking about their work. And if you watch those, they'll throw out terms, and you can usually pick stuff up based on what they're saying. So that's a little easier. And then the king of all interview processes is going to be your portfolio. The big question that we're trying to answer when we interview someone is, can I trust you? Can I give something to you and trust you to take it from start to end? Can I give you a project and not have to handhold you through it every single time? And that's both in terms of a time constraint and monetary constraint from the company, right? Because the company wants to hire people that they don't have to spend a lot of time with, so that you can just go in, get the ball rolling, do work on your own, and they can trust you to do that. Similarly, like, if you require handholding, that is going to take time away from other developers who are working. So the interview process, all boiled down, is basically trying to hire someone where they can avoid that as much as possible. The kind of caveat to that is, like, if you're going in specifically for like an internship or like an educational point job where they're like specifically hiring students, like the COG program at Gearbox, that's a little different. Their focus is a little different, but they still have that aspect, right? Like, they want people that can hit the ground running as fast as possible. They realize that you're going to need a little work to catch up to knowing how the industry works, but they want to have as little time in between you getting hired and you being able to do stuff. A key point on a portfolio is that it shows us that you've worked on something. It shows us that you have certain skill sets already built up, which helps lessen the kind of nervousness we might have about hiring someone who's never worked in the industry before, because it's proof. It's proof that you've done something. Specifically for portfolios, if you make them, make sure you're making them for the job that you want to do. There's some difficulties with that, which I'll get to later on. But like if you're going for a game design job, a video game design job, don't come to me with a board game portfolio. Because like it's better, and I admit, like it's better than nothing. It shows me that you have some design skills. It shows me that you have some knowledge of like how users are going to interact with your product. But that is night and day. The digital realm is so different from the analog realm. So if you bring me a board game portfolio for a video game job, I'm not going to think much of it, unfortunately. You want to have a portfolio that shows your skill set in the job that you want to do. If you're going for like something like mission design, you could have analog things. You could have like a document showing like, I really like this game, so I made a mission for this game. And that would be helpful. But even more helpful than that is like, I really like this game, so I went into its mod tools and I made a mission. And that's great, because now I can play through your mission and I can be like, okay, this is his thought process. He made mistakes here, but that's okay. That's teachable. And it shows me that they have an interest in learning tools and figuring stuff out rather than just kind of depending on someone to tell them how to do something. And that is a valuable asset. Which, speaking of tools, the second part of like the skills is do you know the tools of the industry? If you're applying for a company, are they using Unity? Are they using Unreal? Are they using some proprietary game engine? And do you know how to use that? That helps a lot in terms of a interviewer being like, do we want to hire this guy? If we're like, oh, he already knows how to do blueprint scripting, your bar lowers immensely. If you somehow have knowledge of Perforce and Jira being the most common bug tracking software that I've seen a lot of companies use, and Perforce being our version matching software that, as far as I know, most companies use. If you have knowledge of these tools, that just becomes easier for us. Because we don't have to tell you, okay, when you go into Jira, you want to do these things. If you go into Perforce, this is how you like pull down the deposit. This is how you get latest. This is how you sync to the latest change list, stuff like that. The next set of that is the proprietary tools. And unfortunately, I don't know how you would ever get knowledge of this if you didn't work at the company, but most companies have their own proprietary tools they use with their engines, right? They don't just build based on the base Unreal. Most people will just let you get away with this because they're just, the thought process is like, no matter who comes in here, they're just gonna have to take the time to learn those tools. If you wanna save your questions, I have a question section at the end and you can just ask me there. Sorry, there's a lot of stuff. I'm trying to get through it as fast as possible so I don't keep y'all here for like 3 hours. Yeah, so like something that does help in that regards though is if you have a lot of experience in like learning new things and being able to rapidly learn those tools and use them, that's a huge benefit for us because it teaches us that like, hey, you're like a sponge. You can absorb this knowledge, you can use it pretty immediately. That's great. And finally, what can you provide? What can you specifically provide that benefits the team? And what I mean by this is like, do you have some weird, obscure knowledge that can help us? Like, do you know the Chinese video game laws? Like how they can't use blood and skulls in their games because it's illegal in China? Do you know that like, do you know the Nintendo certification process? Because we're about to build a Switch game. And if you know that process, like hell with your skills. If you know that process, we'll hire you because that's a pain to do that. Or maybe like the company that you're working at is like, we're making a game about wood carving and heck, you whittle in your free time. Like, or like we're making a game about sewing and you're like, oh man, I love sewing. I know the difference between sewing and crocheting, which apparently there is a difference. And I have knowledge of needles and different yarn textures. Like, you'd be surprised at what knowledge can apply to an industry job. So if you have like passions outside of the industry, cultivate those, because you don't know when they'll come in handy. So unfortunate for us fellow introverts out there. I'm so sorry, but you need to work on your social skills. It's very important. Social skills it's a skill. You can cultivate it, I promise you. I'm up here right now, I hate it. I'm very much an introverted person, but you can practice and you can learn and you can get better at it, I promise. But in terms of social skills, they want to know, do you fit in with the rest of the team? And this is pretty easy to find. Like, usually if you go to a game company's page, they'll have a like about us that describes like, hey, we're a fun like group that likes to party on the weekends but work hard on the weekdays. And like, you can usually read that and be like, cool, that sounds like me. I would be interested in this company. You can also read the news and learn all the dirty secrets of that company and be like, maybe don't want to work there. Do you seem like an easy person to work with? Like, there's no better way to say this, but it's really easy for companies not to hire assholes these days because of how big the hiring pool has become. So don't be an asshole. Like, learn how to talk to people. Learn the points that you can push and the points that you can't. Like, learn what is and isn't respectful when talking to people. I say this personally because, like, once again, I was introverted. It was really hard for me to learn how to talk to people. And I basically just studied my extroverted friends and learned how they talk to people and then copied them. And trust me, it gets way easier that way. Networking is such an important thing in the industry. You don't need to be a great communicator. You don't need to be Shakespeare. You just need to be good. You just need to be good enough to be comfortable around other people and for them to be comfortable around you. Do you have an in within the company? The games industry is like such a close-knit company. If you know someone in there who's willing to recommend you, that's a huge bonus for you. But the problem with that is that, once again, you need good social skills to make friends with people in the industry. Like, game devs are very allergic to the people who come in and they're like, hey, I would like a job. How do I get a job? If we're in the middle of like talking to other people and you come in here and you're asking those questions to us, it makes us uncomfortable, right? Because we're people. Like, we just want to have a good time and we don't want to think about work at the moment. It's way easier for someone to vouch for you if they know you. I'm not going to vouch for someone who has come to me and been like, hey, have you seen my portfolio? I would like to get a job. Because I don't know you. I know your work. I don't know your personality. And if they hire you and you're a bad hire, that's my name on the line. And the reason I say that is because your social skills, you want to make friends, not tools. You want to work with people and like engage with them, because then I'd be willing to vouch for you. If I'm your friend, I've seen your work, and we've like partied together or we've hung out together, and I know you well enough, like that topic will naturally come up. If you're like, man, I'm looking for a job, I'll be like, you know what? Our company is hiring. How about I recommend you? Like those kind of conversations will naturally come up. And unfortunately, that process is a long-term process. It's not something where you're going to be like 3 months later, be like, hey, are you going to recommend me a job now? It might take years or like months, depending on who you're talking to. But it requires a skill set that you're going to have to learn how to build. Can you talk competently about your work? I've had so many interviews get flubbed because someone would come in with their portfolio and just wouldn't be able to talk about it. And it made me feel like, oh, you didn't do this. You're either taking it from someone else or you did not learn anything from the work that you've done. So now I can't trust you to actually do a project on your own, right? Because once again, I'm hiring with the idea of like, how do I get someone who can hit the ground running? You want to be, in an interview, you want to be able to explain what you've done in a coherent manner that the interviewer can see your thought process and be like, okay, this is how the guy thinks, this is how he works, and I can trust him to do the work because he's already done it here before. But if you can't communicate that, no one's going to understand like your work ethic or your work process, right? And finally, we have luck. And yeah, this is impossible to cultivate. But you can mitigate it. You can mitigate it with the other skills that you're building up. But unfortunately, luck is just, sometimes you're just at the right place at the right time. When I was saying earlier, like, hey, we're making a game about wood carving, and you just happen to have like an encyclopedic knowledge about wood carving. Like you're a master wood carver. Like that is a right place at a right time moment because most game companies don't talk about their projects unless you've already signed the NDA. So you might not know going into the interview process, but once you get in, you're like, oh God, I'd be perfect for this position. I know everything about wood carving. That is a right time at a right place. Also, like you might be going into a company that's rapidly expanding. So they're like, oh, we're willing to look over like your skills and your social skills because we just need bodies. We need bodies to do work right now. So we're willing to overlook some of that. That's a right time at a right place. Or you might be like me, working QA in a company, they're rapidly expanding, and they're just gonna hire internally because those people already know the tools. They know the software. All they need is the experience. And it's way easier to cultivate that inside the company than outside the company. Cheaper as well, unfortunately. So right time, right place. Can't really, cultivate this. You might be able to get lucky if you're like, find rumors about the next game a company's making and you're like, I know everything about that subject and like interview at that company. But once again, you just don't know. It might happen, might not. And the next person you work with might be your coworker or your boss. My fiance, who is a programmer at Psyonix right now, Rocket League, the way she first got her job is she worked on a project with a friend. He went on to work at Robot as a programmer, and he remembered, oh, this girl, she was really good at her job. She was really easy to work with. She was really pleasant to work with. How about I recommend her? And that's how she got her first job in the industry. So you just don't know. You don't know if that person you're working with on your project is going to be the person who recommends you to your next job. So that's also a right place, right time. So move on to our second part of my presentation. These are the things that I wish I knew going into the industry. And I apologize. I compiled this with a couple of other industry friends. And this is the advice that we kind of all said that we wish we knew. And a lot of it is kind of jaded. So if you want to keep your like kind of rose-tinted, naive view of the industry, close your ears for the next like 30, 40 minutes, possibly. But yeah, I apologize for shattering some of your potential dreams. So number one, this is kind of already on the internet, but be careful meeting your heroes. And that's kind of like both people, company, and games. People, like you already hear this with movie stars, like they're humans. Like they might have bad days and you go in to ask for a picture or a sign and they're just like really snippy at you. Like it's gonna happen. We're humans. Like We have good and bad days. Don't just be like, go meet people that are like super famous with a grain of salt. Because not all of them are going to be like as awesome as you expect them to be. Same with companies. Companies are corporations. They're trying to make money. They're a formless entity. Don't put them on a pedestal. Like, I know especially here, there's probably a lot of people who are like, man, I would love that job at that one company. I won't say like it's not going to be great to work there, but just temper your expectations. It's not like the hallelujah Jesus come alive moment for you. Once you're there, you're gonna start learning about like some of the processes, and it's just not going to be quite as glamorous as you always imagined it to be. And that's kind of the same with subject with games. Like, you might have your favorite game that you want to really, really work on. Much like how in the fast food industry, people at McDonald's don't eat at McDonald's. People who work on their games tend not to play their games. And that could be for a variety of reasons. Maybe they're tired of the process that it took to make those games. Maybe you're just tired of spending 600 hours like already playing a game that's about to come out. It kind of loses its luster. And I won't say that's true for everyone, but once again, just, temper your expectations. My second point, don't kill yourself for your company. I was here. I was the person who wanted to work super late hours to prove a point. I was the new guy. Don't do that. Companies aren't going to kill themselves for you. They're not going to put the same investment that you're going to put into them. Especially if a company is like, we're a family. That's a red flag. That's not like wholesome and nice. That's a red flag. You don't want to hear a company say that, because a family means that they're going to make you work crunch without paying you overtime, because you're family. You're expected to work those hours to better the family. But you know what happens when that company runs out of money? You're the first one out the door. And that's just the truth. Companies are corporations. They're trying to make money, and they'll do whatever they can do to stay afloat. It's just how America works, right? The investment, how investors work and how companies work. It's just, they're legally obliged to stay afloat. The age of streaming has made game development like way more terrifying and way more rewarding. Being able to see people play your games is both the most amazing and the worst thing to happen in real time, because you see every mistake, but you see every reaction as well. And if you're making your own game, I recommend like throwing it out there for people to play, because it's also the best way to learn. A lot of the stuff that I saw people interact with in Borderlands 3, I fixed when I went into DLC. And I kept that in mind. Like, I kept those notes in mind when I was watching people. So that is a huge aspect that did not exist when I was first starting in the industry. Number 4, there are a huge amount of specializations in games. Like, even within design, when you say designer, I'm going to say, what do you mean? Because you could be a narrative designer. You could be a level designer. You could be a creature designer. You could be a boss designer. You could be an enemy designer. You could be a mission designer. Like, this, the amount of specializations that exist within games, especially if you go into the AAA space, is surprising. If you have a passion for something, follow that passion, because it will eventually lead you into games if you're still interested. Caveat to that, it might take longer, it might take a little more effort. I won't lie, but it will stay fun to you. If you have a passion, follow it. Like, it will get you into games eventually, because like what game companies are looking for is such a wide net, especially in the AAA space. When you have like 500 people working on something and you specialize in one thing, that is a huge boon to them. Obviously, indie games and maybe AA studios, it's a little different. They're looking for more like jack of all trades. But it is surprising as to what you can specialize in to get into the industry. Like, just for example, we have someone at our current company, and all he does is like read historical military documents just to make sure that we're being accurate. That's all he does. At Gearbox, we had someone who was specifically responsible for knowing the lore of Borderlands. That's all he was responsible for. He also worked as a writer as well, but his main specialty and I believe the reason that he was hired was because he had a huge data bank of the Borderlands knowledge. So if you have a passion, go for it. You will most likely not be working on a game you enjoy playing. Many of y'all might already know this, but like your first job especially, you're probably going to work on a game that you're going to be like, I don't want to play this on my free time. That's fine. You're going to quickly learn that if you want to get into the games industry, you're going to have to find the joy in like creating a project. Those are the people that stay. You don't want to find the joy in like playing the product, right? Alternatively, you find ways to enjoy what you're doing. Like if you're working on casino games, maybe you really enjoy pulling that lever, and you're going to make the best lever pulling mechanic that anyone has goddamn seen. And that's okay, as long as you find the enjoyment in doing that. I say that. Some of y'all might really enjoy those lever games. I don't know. I'm sorry if I poo-pooed on your hobby. As I said earlier, board games are vastly different from video games. Like, completely different. The skill set that you need to work in a digital space versus an analog space, and this is more focused for designers because both art and like, I guess, narrative in terms of like writing rule sets can kind of bleed a little more. But specifically for design, if you, like I said, come with a board game portfolio, I'm not going to think much of it. The skill set that you need in order to build a video game is just so vastly different from a board game. Number 7, games are a team effort. The age of the rockstar game developer has kind of gone by. There's still people who do it, but as you probably noticed, there's no one who's like quite as big as like John Carmack was back when he was a developer. And the reason for that is just because games have become so complicated and so big that you're going to be working with a huge team of people in order to do that. With that said, like, don't be that asshole who goes into a game room and it's like, I'm the god among gods. Like, listen to me and I will lead you to. I was making a Jesus reference here. I probably shouldn't do that, but follow me and I will lead you to success. That's not going to happen. Like, you're working with a group of people, but at the same time, that means you're surrounded by people who have the same passion as you, and that honestly like empowers me every day. It's so much fun to like work with fellow people and be like, hey, I'm working on this thing, and they're like, hey, I'm working on this thing, and you can collaborate. You can be like, oh, that's really cool. How about you? Have you tried these things? They're like, have you tried these things? That back and forth is really what energizes you to like work in the industry. Plus, you make a lot of friends, like a lot of like tabletop friends or board gaming friends, or like I know a group of Gearbox. We literally have, back when I was at Gearbox, we literally had a channel of like 16 people who like to go rock climbing. So they would just always go rock climbing together as a group. Like, you're gonna find people with your own hobbies and passions. Never strive to be the smartest person in the room. Strive to be in the room with the smartest people. And this is a quote that some of y'all might know already. This is twofold. Once again, don't be that asshole who thinks they're the smartest in the room. It's not going to be you. There's always going to be someone smarter. It's just going to happen. It's just going to make you look really bad in front of other people. Once again, the age of the rockstar developer has kind of died. And the person there, they're known in the industry, and not in the good way. Trust me. The second part of that is like, be in a place where you can constantly learn. The industry is all about like continuing to build your skill set. Even I'm continuously learning. I'm a senior right now. I'm not gonna lie, I don't feel like a senior because I'm still learning things. I'm learning so much every day. Every day is a new skill, a new piece of information that I didn't know before. So like you want to be in that situation where you're going to be able to be surrounded by people who can teach you. Number 9, have a basic idea of how other disciplines work. If I have any animators out there, you probably heard my like pitch of having 3 people hooking arms and dancing together, and you were probably like, oh my God, that's horrifying. Why would you ever ask for that? Because guess what? In animation, having 2 entities interact with each other is very difficult. It's super hard. But you wouldn't know that if you weren't an animator or if you had no knowledge of that space, right? It really helps to have at least a basic understanding of how other disciplines work because it allows you to ask for things. Like if I was going to go to code and be like, hey, I want this thing, I have a basic understanding of how long that would take, how difficult of an ask that would be. And that's really appreciated in the industry when you're like talking to people and being like, hey, I know this is hard, but can we do this? A part of that is don't be the person that's like, well, I went to a class for coding in college, and I know that this is really easy. Don't be that person. People hate that person. Everyone hates that person. Plus, like, you just don't know. Every company is different. Like, what's easy in one company is vastly difficult in the other. And it's just how their systems are built up. You just won't know. But knowing this will at least let you be in the situation where you're like, hey, can we do this? And they're like, no, we can't. And then you can be like, okay, why not? And what are the alternatives, right? The game industry is very much like choosing that middle ground, picking your battles, like knowing when to push and when to like kind of back off and be like, okay, we can't do this. And this knowledge really helps in that kind of situations. Number 10, don't be afraid of failure. It's going to happen. At Gearbox, I won't say we had a betting pool, but I'm pretty sure there was a betting pool of like how long it would take before the new hire like broke our build and just made it so no one could work that day. It's just going to happen. Like you're working in an unfamiliar environment with unfamiliar tools. Just learn from it, take responsibility, move on. It's fine. I've had so many emails where I've replied all when I meant to reply to one person. And let me tell you, within a group of like 400 people, there's always like 10 or so people who are really angry about getting an email that was unnecessary. And it's not just once. I've done it multiple times. So like, you know, learn from me, learn a lesson. At the same time, don't be chaos incarnate. Like, don't just run in there and be like, it's fine if I make mistakes. The Asian guy up here told me so. Like, don't do that. Like, you learn from your mistakes, take accountability, move on. It's fine. Don't look at the comment section. Unless that's your job, please don't look at the comment section. You will never satisfy everybody. If that's your job, man, salute you, sir. Like, I truly respect the thing you're doing. Let those people find the constructive criticism and the useful information and relay that back to you. Don't take your time to look through the comment section. It is just going to ruin your day. That issue you're complaining about in our game, yeah, we know. We know. We're the people who've worked on the game the longest. We know about it. Things like that happen because of time, budget, or other constraints. Usually like technology. Once you get into the industry, I'm going to say once you get into the industry, man, you're going to be really tired of those comments that are like, man, these developers are so dumb. Why didn't they just do this? And you're going to be like, we thought about it and we couldn't because it took too much time, or it would break the 30 other things in our build. Trust me, we know. You don't need to tell us. In fact, that's part of the problem with streaming, is that you'll watch people play things and you'll be like, that texture is not right. That person is going to just have a ruined experience because their texture isn't right, or, oh, they forgot to import this one thing that I needed for my mission. They're going to see that. Half the time people don't even notice. Don't sell your dream to a corporation / company. I have 2 caveats to this. If you're okay with your dream looking nothing like your dream, totally go for it. Once again, games are a team effort. People have different opinions about what they want to see. And unless you're like the core creative vision holder, like that vision is not going to be what you initially put in. I have never seen a mission that has ended the same way it has started. I, in fact, have never seen a game that has ended the same way it started. Like, you see that all the time. You'll see concept art for a game and you'll be like, wow, why didn't they put that in? It's because the concept changed. Things changed. And if you're okay with that, sell your dream to the company. Like that, go for it. The second caveat to that is that if you're okay with it potentially never coming out, go for it. You see it all the time. You saw it recently with the Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic remake. They just canceled it. It might never come out. If you were working on that game and you're like, this is my dream, this is the pitch I made to the company, and they just said, oh, we're canceling it, guess what? You might never see that again. Because now they own that IP. They own that idea. So you might never see that dream come to life, or it might get sold to a different company that you're not working at. So now someone else is working on your dream and you can't do anything about it because it's not yours anymore. Unfortunately, if you have like a dream idea or a dream game that you really want to see come to life, you're either going to have to work on it by yourself with maybe like a small group of people, or you're going to have to be like the core vision holder who has all the say. Which then comes into the problem of like potentially you becoming the asshole person who doesn't listen to advice. So being a gamer is not the same as being a game developer. Like I said, point 2 or 3, 4, one of my points. 5. Yeah, you're not going to work on a game that you enjoy playing. And that's just a thing that's going to happen. Like, just because you play games doesn't mean you're going to be a good game developer. Being a gamer gets you familiarity with games, but it doesn't give you a skill set. That's not going to build up your skills. I'm not going to trust you to make a project if you've told me that I've spent 300 hours in Elden Ring, especially if I'm working on a like first-person shooter. Like, that's going to mean nothing to me. It's just going to mean that you spent a lot of time in Elden Ring, which is impressive. Not going to lie. I'm not going to hire you for that reason, right? Looking at my notes. Yeah, so, yeah. Don't think just because you play games, that's going to get you the skill set in order to succeed in an interview. Like, you want to build skill sets outside of just games. Your greatest strength and weakness is your passion. Passion is really what makes this industry run. It is an unfortunate truth that if you go outside of the gaming industry, your salary jumps up by like 40 to 60%, depending on what job you're doing. And it's just an unfortunate truth about the creative industry, right? It's because people really want to see their idea come to life. Unfortunately, people are going to exploit that, right? They're going to use that passion against you. If you really love something, they're going to be like, oh, well, maybe you want to work on it for like maybe 20% pay cut. And you'll be like, oh my God, would I? Because you just don't know. You don't know. So just be careful, because people are going to try to exploit that passion because they're going to get the most amount of work out of you for the least amount of money. Don't just play games. Widen your horizon. And this plays into that luck aspect. Like, you don't know if that wood carving game is ever going to come out. If you have an interest in wood carving, explore it. A huge example of this is Pokemon. I don't know how many of y'all know like the history of Pokemon, but the person who made it, Satoru Tajiri, I think it's Tajiri, he used his experience as a child when he would go out to like catch bugs in the forests of Japan, and he turned that into a game. That was his original reasoning for making that game. He didn't play like Othello and been like, man, it would really be great if like pieces in Othello were also like creatures that evolved and like you could capture them. It was his personal experience outside of games that created like a multi-billion-dollar company. Like, cultivate your passions outside of just the industry, because you never know when they'll play in. And like, the most interesting ideas come from places outside of games. Like, the people sitting here in front of me, you're gonna make a game that I would have never thought about. I just don't have that experience, or I don't have that knowledge. You're gonna make something that I would have never dreamed of. And I personally want to see those come to life, right? As part of like my passion for the industry is I want to see those ideas come to life. And if you're only working in games, you're going to have a harder time kind of creating those moments. The hardest thing to do is get in for the first time. Once you're, I'm pretty sure they've said this in all your classes, but once you're in the industry, it's pretty easy to move through the industry like vertically. If you're trying to move like up into a different position or down into a different position, that might take a little work, but it's still significantly easier than trying to apply for the first time. And once again, that plays back into corporations. They're trying to hire people that can hit the ground running. If you already have knowledge of how you make games and like you have knowledge of like how other people, like how much time certain work is going to take, they can trust you to do that work. So like other companies are far more willing to take a risk with you once you've been in the industry before.
Someone named Alliance on Discord. I think.
This is a personal pet peeve. Please play the game you're working on. Even if you don't like it, at least invest some time. And I'm not just talking from a design perspective. I'm talking to like art and code. Like, it helps so much to learn the tone and style of what you're working on. And some of the most difficulties I've had is when I've talked to my narrative guy, and I'm like, hey, I want this moment. And he'd be like, okay. And he wrote out the moment, and I'd be like, this is not right. Have you played through the mission? And he goes like, no. And I'm like, we're gonna sit down, we're gonna play through the mission together. And he was like, oh, that makes a lot of sense. And then the second time he wrote that, it was perfect. It was exactly what I wanted. You're not gonna understand things unless you take the time to play. Most companies do like a playtest. Please be the person to go to playtest and like give feedback. Like, put your mark on the game. There's no guarantee that your feedback will be used, but at least like you're trying to understand the game and make a change in the game. Like, it is a huge pet peeve when people complain about things and they haven't played the game. And I'm like, you don't understand it because you haven't played the game. Like, if you played the game, this makes more sense. So please play the game you're working on. That's a personal call. And finally, making games is a fantastic experience. It's why I'm still in here. Like I said, if I go out of the industry, you can make a 40 to 60% increase. I don't know how I would use game design outside of the game industry, but if I could potentially get a 40 to 60% pay rise in my salary. But I chose to stay because I love the process. I love creating something, making an idea, bringing it to life, and giving it to other people and seeing them experience that for the first time. It really, like, when I was sitting in school like the rest of y'all, I knew that I wanted to make games, but I didn't realize just how much fun it would be once I got into the industry. It is so fulfilling, and you're going to learn very quickly whether or not you want to stay in the industry. Once you put your first game out there, seeing people like work on it and been like, man, it was sure like all those memories of like 12-hour days of like grueling at the computer and stressing out about like whether or not things were going to work. Those were sure worth it. Can't wait to do it again. Like that will really tell you if you really want to work in the industry. With that, I'm going to go into my personal tier list of jobs that I think are easiest to get without industry experience. Huge disclaimers. This is a personal list. I've only worked at like AAA and AA companies. Indies might be completely different. And this is not to poo-poo on like your passion. There's going to be a couple down here at the very bottom that might really hurt people. Please don't let me kill your passion. It's not for that. It's mostly for if you happen to have an interest in other aspects, maybe spend the time to explore the interest. You're in college right now. This is the perfect time to do that. Like I said, widen your horizons. Like that's what this is for. If you have a passion, you really want to do that, and it shows up as F tier, which I'm pretty sure it's going to show up as for some people, please don't let me poo-poo that. Like that passion is something I do not want to kill. I just want to temper your expectations and let you know that, hey, if you have an interest of other things, maybe explore those and use that as like a jumping off point to get into the like final job you want. With that said, we're going to go into my S tier. So S tier, QA, programming, player support. The reason I say this, QA and player support are soft skills, which means it's really easy. It's hard for people to be like, oh, you're going to be a great QA or you're going to be a bad QA. You're going to be a great player support. You're going to be a bad player support. It's really hard for people to make those decisions. And a lot of the skill sets you need don't need to come from within the industry. It's really easy to get those jobs. It's also, unfortunately, a job where a lot of people go in and out of those positions. So there's usually always openings for those jobs. And unfortunately, in our industry, those also tend to be contract. A lot of people kind of look down on the QA. I'll say corporations look down on QA and player support. They don't see it as careers. I really wish that these were careers. Let me tell you, like a good QA really changes your life as a developer versus a bad QA. I've had both. I had people that if they were in QA and they were like, hey, I'm looking to change jobs, I would be like, please come work for us. Like, you do fantastic work. And I have people where if they were like, I would like to look for a job, I'd be like, good luck. I hope you find something, man. Programming is specifically because it's a hard skill set, which is weird because I know it's kind of contrary, but it's really easy to prove if you have the skills for programming. And programming is like the golden child of the games industry. Everyone's looking for a programmer. So companies are far more willing to take a risk to hire a skilled programmer. I'm going to key point this, skilled programmer to work at their company, even if they don't have the experience to do so. Because I don't want to say they're desperate, but they're desperate. And there's always a lack of good programmers around. And once again, programmers get like, I know I said 40 to 60, but like I know people who have literally tripled their salary because they went to Home Depot to work on an app. And then they were like, I hated working on an app. I came back to games. So, you know, like programming is like a big pay increase if you go outside of the games industry. A tier, production. And I say this because in my personal opinion, there's a lot of openings for production. And those skill sets, you can totally build outside of the industry. the skill sets you build outside the industry easily bleed into skill sets within an industry. It's especially easy for like you on your portfolio to be like, hey, I led this group of people. I made these like timelines. These are the tools I used. And it's really easy for game companies to be like, oh, cool. Like you have production skills. That's really easy to see. Sure, work in the industry because you don't need industry experience. You just need skills in production. B tier. We have art and design. We have community moderation, and we have social community. Art and design, that's kind of tough because I know it's super generic. Within art, there's like concept artists, animators, modelers, 2D modelers, people who specifically like do rigging. So like depending on what you go for, this can go up and down. But they're in B tier because the pool is so large compared to how many openings are usually available at companies. And they're, once again, it's a soft skill. And it's so, it's really subjective in terms of what they're looking for. You might just really get unlucky. Your portfolio might be displaying like, I'm really good at stylized art, and the company just happens to be looking for very realistic art. They just didn't tell you, and it's not advertised because it's a game they're currently working on, and you just couldn't have known that. So it's just really unfortunate. And unfortunately, like that subjectivity with art and design makes it really hard for people to get in at those positions. Community moderators, it's at B tier because it's a huge time investment. Like in order for you to be a moderator, you'd have to be like in the community forums like constantly and prove that like you're someone who's not insane. But like, hey, if you're someone who does that and you're pretty consistent, you're probably going to get that job. It's not difficult. It's just a huge investment. Unfortunately, also, like as a community moderator, you're probably not going to get a ton of industry experience. They don't tend to work very closely with the devs, so you're just not going to learn that much, unfortunately. In terms of social community, that's kind of like people who work socials / the marketing department. This is mostly just because like the group is so small. Socials more so just because like that's also an investment. You have to prove that, hey, I have like 1 million followers on Twitter, and they'll be like, oh, sweet, like you know socials, like come work for us. But that's a huge investment. And I think at our company, we had like, at Gearbox, we had like 400 people and 2 people were responsible for like our socials. So not a lot of openings there. And same with marketing. Marketing, you're going to be competing with people outside of the industry. They're probably going to look for people who are interested in games just because like they understand like the current trends. But it's a skill that you're going to be constantly trying to develop. You're going to be racing after those trends, trying to predict those, and fighting with people outside of the industry. And also not a huge group. I think at Gearbox we had like 5 people out of our 400 that worked in marketing. So C tier, IT. Some of these might not be interesting to y'all. Once again, it's just to expand your horizons, but I've never seen a young person work IT at our companies. They've all tend to be like people who are like veterans of the IT industry, and they get like recommended to come in and work at like the games industry. And the biggest problem with IT in the games industry is the team is so small that it's usually like, if you're working IT, you have to know everything. You're going to be working on both like updating and upkeeping servers, building computers, working with licensing for the different programs that people need. And once again, not a huge amount of people who, not a huge amount of openings for these positions. In D tier, we have HR and recruiting. Once again, it's because they tend to hire outside of the industry. Like these, it doesn't really matter if you're interested in the games industry to work in HR and recruiting. So they're going to look for people who have way more experience than you outside of the industry and pull them in. If you try to go into these, it's going to be a huge time investment for you. Recruiting especially so, because you're going to have networking skills to be able to contact people from other places to be like, hey, do you happen to know if anyone's looking for a job? Like that's a huge time investment that is going to take a while before you get a job in the industry as that. Yeah. So F tier, writing and sound. This is like the worst of all the tiers, unfortunately, because in our company we had at Gearbox, when we were like a 300, 400 person company, I think like 350 people, we had 3 people on our writing team. There's so many people who want to be a writer or work in sound for the industry. And unfortunately, the openings for that are so small. They also have the problem where you're competing against people outside of the industry for these jobs. Like, their companies are going to hire big names, like we've seen with Elden Ring hiring George R.R. Martin to do like narrative for them. They're going to hire big names because what? That gives them marketing. It helps them sell. So you're going to be competing with people who have like written books or already have been in the writing industry for years. They also have the issue where they have the subjectivity. Like, what you find funny is not what everyone else is going to find funny. Or like the things that you think sound good are not what everyone else thinks sound good. So that subjectivity is also going to hurt you, because they're going to be looking for something very specific and you just won't know. You can better your chances if, like, say, I want to work at Gearbox, like study their games, figure out their humor, like build a portfolio that kind of capitalizes on that. But if you find out, like, maybe Gearbox is like, oh, we want to hire a writer for this first-person shooter that's set in like a gritty world, and you just won't know until you get in and they're like, oh, this isn't what we're looking for. And you're like, well, I could have done something about that, but there was no way for me to know. And the same exact with sound. Like, you might learn Gearbox's like sound for like Borderlands, and then they turns out like they're hiring for a completely different genre, and you're just like, well, I just didn't know. Probably less interesting for y'all, finances and administrative. Both of those, because the amount of time to upkeep those skills and become good enough for people to hire you is so difficult. Finances especially, like anyone who's worked in finances for larger companies, they've already worked with publishers. They have experience working with publishers, and those are the people that get hired. And they're usually pulled from recommendations. They're like, oh, I knew this guy. He worked with us previously. We'll just hire him into our company. So that's going to be hard to get. Administrative as well. You almost never see administrative jobs on a career page, because usually they're just like, hey, we need someone to work administrative, and someone will be like, oh, my like wife works administrative over at the school, and they'll be like, cool, she's hired. So you'll never see those. You'll rarely see those positions like on a page. But yeah, I know I shattered some dreams with the writer and sound. Please, if you have a passion for that, please follow through with it. Just know that you're going into a boxing match with those positions. Like, the pool is large, the hirings are small, the people that are in there don't leave. They die in those positions because it's so hard to get into those. And unfortunately, those are also like some of the positions that are the hardest, that are the slowest to hire. If we lose a writer, we don't immediately hire a new writer. We just give more work to the writers that are already there, because they're kind of seen as less priority. And so even if the writing team is like, we really need like 4 more writers for our game, they're like, we'll get to that. And then the game comes out. So just keep that in mind. With that, I'm going to open it for questions. I just want y'all to know, I do have an email. If I don't get to your question, I have an email specifically where you can send me questions. Feel free to send me any like questions about the industry. My only caveats to that don't send me "Are you hiring?" emails. Please look that up yourself, because I'm going to have to do that as well. So I'm just going to do the same work as you are, and it's just going to take me time away from answering other questions. And please don't send me like files. If you want to send me stuff, like send me a link through a hosting website. I'm not going to open anything on my computer for obvious reasons. But yeah, I mean, I opened this up because, like I said, I really want to see your ideas come to life. I'm really passionate about that. You have ideas that I'm never going to think of. You're going to have creations that I never would have seen coming. One of the games I'm most excited about is a game called Thirsty Suitors, which is like an Indian version of Scott Pilgrim. And I was like, that is incredible. I love the art style. I love this gameplay. Never would have done that. I'm not Indian. I have no idea what that culture is like. I have no experience of that. But that person was able to make that. And I'm excited to see that from y'all as well, which is why I'm up here doing this and opening this question email for y'all. So if you have questions I don't get to at this moment, send them there. With that, who has questions? You.
So you were mentioning things about like in your portfolio, what does and doesn't apply to the industry, like board games don't necessarily apply to the need of it. Are there is there like a certain line where something doesn't apply because it's too far removed, or is that just company? Like for example, if I want to do like level design, like Doom 2016 has a built-in rather complex level editor. Would big levels in that apply to the industry, like the portfolio? Or
Yeah, 100%, because the skill set that they're looking for in a level designer is, do you make good levels and can we trust you to make a level? If you show that like, hey, I made these in like Doom, like that's just as valuable as like I made these in like the Gears of War modification engine. Like the importance is that you are showing that you have that skill set. The reason I make comparisons of like board games versus video games is because, like, just for example, in narrative, there's a very specific skill set you're trying to build in narrative, especially with like missions where you're trying to build a story within like 5 to 10 second chunks of time. If you play through like a mission in Borderlands, keep in mind of how different that is in comparison to like writing a book. It's two very different skill sets. And that's why I mentioned that. Like, you just want to make sure that whatever you're applying for shows that you have the skill set where they can trust you to do the job. Go for it.
You said your fiance was a programmer.
Yeah.
She was a CS major, and so how did she find employment before the recommendation?
She was, so funny enough, she was originally a writer. She wanted to work in ad agencies to write advertisements for them. And then she had a teacher that was so bad that she became a programmer. Yeah, crazy. But yeah, and the way she originally got her job was, I don't think she was part of Guildhall, but someone in Guildhall worked on a project together with her in her computer science class. And they remembered the work she did and her work ethic when they went into the games industry. She also had the positive portfolio aspect of when she got hired into a company that was making like a frog typing game, which no one ever played. But they were like trying to get into the games industry. So she worked on that project too. So when she got interviewed at Robot, she was like, oh, I've already worked on games. Like, here's my code. And I basically worked on this project by myself. And they were like, oh, that's impressive. You worked on a project. Yeah, we'd be willing to hire you. Go for it.
So on the slide where you're talking about like social skills, right?
Yeah.
Whenever you go into an interview, obviously you want to put your best foot forward. So anybody can say like, I'm reliable, I'm a good teammate, I can do X, Y, Z. But as an interviewer, what tells you they know what they're talking about, or they mean that, or I can see that, since you're not seeing them work
Right.
in the environment?
A little bit of that is like how confident you are. We've had interviewees fail just because they were so nervous that like they basically failed to answer any of the questions properly. Also, we kind of figure out like, hey, you're not actually interested in this position when we ask you questions and you avoid the questions and talk about other things. And then like, basically you talk like a politician where you're like, we ask you a question and you don't answer the question, but you give us an answer. Stuff like that really personally irks me in interviews. Another, like there is a lot of the times when you go into the interview, we keep in mind that, hey, you're going to be nervous, especially if you're a first time interviewer. We keep that in mind. So you don't have to be too worried about that, but if you're nervous to the point where you can't like coherently make statements, then there's no way for us to judge you about your skills. And yeah, you're right. You can say that you're good at all that stuff, and that might be true, but that's where the skills come in as well. Because if we give you questions about like, hey, you gave us a mission design doc, you can't do X, Y, and Z, write us a new pitch. And you just can't do that, that is going to be a huge mark against you. And that's going to happen for both, I believe. I'm not totally sure about the art process, but I know for code, like they're going to be like, hey, here's a hypothetical situation, please solve it. And you're just going to be able to, you need to be able to talk out your thought process, more so than solving the problem and getting the right answer. They want to see how you are thinking and how you are solving the problem, because that gives us them valuable information about like, are you teachable? And do you have a good set of basic skills? There's a lot of people that will fail if they just sit there in the interview and like quietly like do stuff on their own, because we don't know how you're working. We don't understand your process. So yeah, hopefully that answers your question. Go for it.
You said don't look in the comment section in one of your posts. I was wondering, does that equate to everything around the game? Like if someone's like playing through the game, they have to teach
I mean, obviously, look, some people are more okay with this, but when I watch Twitch, I close that comment section when I'm watching people play my game. Like, I don't want to hear what they're saying. I just want to experience what that person in the moment is experiencing. You know, if you have thicker skin than me, go for it. Dredge through those weeds, but man, like, you're gonna grow a thick skin and you're gonna hate everyone by the end of it. Go for it.
So you mentioned that programming is an SQ skill. Like, what level of programming do you need? Like, what engine should we know? Like, how well should we know how to build those engines?
Man, I wish I could give you specifics. I don't know. I'm not a programmer, but I would say make a game and figure out what skill sets you need to build from there, because that is going to be the most valuable. In any situation, like if you solo make a game, and you don't even have to like throw it out into the market, but if it's at least like something you're willing to show off to people, that is a huge bonus when you go to an interview. Because it covers all those points. It shows us that you're like willing to learn new skills, you're quick to pick those up, you kind of have an understanding of how long things are going to take. So like, I wish I could give you specific answers. I don't know if you like need to build your own physics engine, but like the person who got hired before my fiance, he got hired because he made a search engine for the game they were working on, and they were so impressed by that code. They were like, man, you do great coding, and they hired him. So I don't know if that helps, but like he built a search engine, which had nothing to do with the game. Go for it.
The announcement for this meeting said that you're a former SGDA member. Do you feel like this club played a big stepping stone for your career at all?
I'm willing to say that I got my job because of this club, but that is with the caveat that there were many connections that I went to. Like a lot of the people I worked with, someone recommended me to GDC because I was good friends with one of the SGDA people, and they were a regular GDC member. They recommended me to go to GDC. I went to GDC. I made friends with one of the developers there, and they're like, "Hey, Robot is hiring playtesters. Do you want to come and playtest that robot? You're local to Dallas, right?" I was not. I was in Houston at the time, and I said yes. So that's how I got my job as a playtester at Robot. And then I made friends with the lead QA, not deliberately. I wasn't thinking I was going to get a QA job, but I was just a very friendly person. I was willing to talk to him, and I was willing to do a little extra work in order to make his life easier. And he was like, "Hey, you'd be great at QA. Do you want to work at QA?" I was like, "Yeah," worked at QA. From there, I made friends with some of the designers, and I was like, "Hey, I really want to learn how to do some of this stuff. Do you have any advice or recommendations?" And they were like, "Yeah, try to do. Here's some recommendations. Here's some things you can work on." I worked on those, and I went back and forth with them, and they were like, "Hey, we have an opening for a designer opening up. Do you want to come in and work as a designer?" I was like, "Yeah, I would love to," and that's how I got my design job. So, everything is interconnected. I might have never gotten my first job if it wasn't for me in SGDA. Not only that, I still use advice that I've gotten from people who've come to talk at SGDA or going to Game Lab and working on a game. A lot of that advice I still use in my current work. So you just don't know. And college is a great place to kind of try a lot of different things and learn a lot of different things, and you just don't know what's going to help you in the future. At minimum, it won't hurt you. You're just building a bigger knowledge base. Go for it.
What is working in QA and player support entail exactly?
I can't tell you as much about player support. I know those people need. I know, once again, those are the people who wade through the comment section. I salute them. That's a hard job. It's awful. But I know you need to show you can keep calm under fire. You can communicate with other people. You have those good social skills to be able to answer people's questions and not get them confused about what they're doing. Man, QA, you need to be able to talk to developers in a coherent manner. I don't know how many of y'all did this in elementary school where teachers would be like, "How do you make a peanut butter sandwich?" And you would write instructions, and the teachers would literally follow your instructions and be like, "You told me to close the sandwich, so I didn't rub peanut butter, or you didn't tell me to put peanut butter on the bread, so I'm just closing the sandwich without peanut butter now." It's surprising how much of that actually applies to QA, because you're trying to communicate directions to a developer who might not have the full picture of what you're trying to do. Some of our artists don't open our engine. They work exclusively in Photoshop and Maya, so they don't really have a reason to open Unreal. And so if you're telling the artist there's a texture bug in level 5 at this rock, they're going to be like, I don't understand what level 5 is. How do I get to level 5? How do I get to this rock? You need to be good at being able to create that list of instructions without being tedious. And also there tends to be a lot of problems with bad QA where you go back and forth 30 times, because they'll be like, "There's a bug," and you're like, "I can't reproduce this bug. I guess it was fixed." And they'll be like, "It's still there," and you're like, "I don't understand how it's still there. I can't see it." And then they come back to you and they're like, "It's actually this bug." And I'm like, "Why did you not just tell me that when you first sent this to me? We would have saved 3 works worth of back and forth had you just said that." So communication skills are so important when it comes to QA. I think that's one of the things I had to do when I was first hired to QA was they gave us the "make me a peanut butter sandwich," and I was like, "Well, you take the bread and you put peanut butter on it," and they were like, "left hand or right hand?" And I'm like, "It doesn't matter." So that's the kind of skill set you need to build.
As a student, is it difficult to add this to your portfolio efficiently with classes, especially for mission design and level design? Do you have any tips for adding stuff that stays relevant and not just random stuff?
That's so hard, only because your interests might change as you do things. specifically for mission design, it could be as easy as just writing a document. Like if you have a game you really love, try to imagine how you would make a mission in that follows the theme of whatever you're doing. And the most important thing is show that off to other people. Like you're gonna read something that you've created and you're gonna be like, there's two groups of people. You're gonna be like, this is God's gift to Earth, or this is the worst thing that's ever been created. No one's gonna love me anymore. You just need someone from outside to like read into that and be like, I don't understand what you're trying to do here, or this doesn't really feel like this type of game. And that's going to give you valuable experience in terms of like being able to view your own work and making adjustments, and also learning the tricks of like, oh, I better make sure like I include these details next time I do something like this. Like any little thing helps. Obviously, some things have more impact than others, but anything you can do kind of outside of your classwork to show that I'm willing to build up this skill set and I can do this job helps. Whether that just be a document or whether that be like an actual mod that you worked in.
It hasn't been like, it's been,
Go for it.
I'm just looking for this.
So currently I'm a mech hunter, right? And the number one thing I'm really worried about when going into the processes,
You're right.
is that I have a skill set of creative stuff that I could express, but I don't know if when they see my major, that would dissuade them
It's
from that.
disappeared again.
How much does your degree matter versus how much your skills matter?
No, because, sorry, to answer your question, your degrees don't matter as much as your actual skill sets. Like in your resume, if your degree doesn't apply to the job you're applying for, just don't put it in. Just put your work experience. Show that, like, if I'm like I'm in the narrative, like I'm getting a narrative degree, but I really want to become a 3D artist. I'm only going to show like, hey, I worked on this model for this like project, and I worked on this model for this game. Like I'm not gonna tell them that like I have a narrative degree. Like it just doesn't matter for my resume. And that's also why reason I say portfolio is king, because like they're going to see your portfolio and be like, oh, you worked on this stuff that applies to these skills. Like that's invaluable. Like they're not gonna look at your degree and be like, oh, he's a mech guy. Like if anything, that's a talking point when you go into your interview. Because I always go into my interviews being like, I was originally an electrical engineer and I went into games, and they're like, oh, that's interesting. Tell us more. And that helps build social skills.
And then I guess additionally, just like, if I were to like rope it in, kind of like you're saying, make it sound like a positive, would that be a good thing to mention or not?
Yeah, as long as you can spin it into your skill set, 100%. That's useful. I mean, I don't know a lot of people who would be like, oh, he's a mech guy, like poo-poo on that. Like I don't know a lot of, if anything, that just creates a talking point. Possibly like if you have like an other skills section, you can put it there and be like, hey, in my other skills, like I'm this is my degree and I work on mechs, and they'll be like, that's really fucking cool. Like, what do you do on mechs? And once again, it's a chance to show off your social skills, to like create a conversation and like then lead into like, oh, those skills have taught me how to do like this stuff, which applies to the job I'm applying for.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. In the back.
So you mentioned the Instagram for a year. Is that something you don't want to fully out of school?
Yes. So I got my job like a year. I got my first job like a year after I had graduated. Some people it takes them more time. Some people it takes them less time. One of the SGDA members, at the time when I was in the SGDA, was actually working at Gearbox as an animator already, and then he would, she would come to school to do night classes basically. My fiance was working half days as a programmer for Robot, and then going to SMU to finish her degree. So it's possible. You can totally get a job before you graduate. Man, that is impressive if you do. Especially nowadays, the industry is so like inflated with so many people who are interested in getting in that you really have to like have a good portfolio to like be able to do that. But yeah, it's very, very possible. Go for it.
You say portfolio is king, and I know that each field has their own kind of portfolio style.
Right.
For a programmer, have you heard or talked about or maybe seen whether it's like they have like their own website, or it's just their LinkedIn, their GitHub attached to it, or it's just they bring in a laptop and give you a controller and have you play it? Like,
my fiance had her own website that had like bits of code that she worked on. But hey, send that to me in Kim Questions, and I will ask her and see if I can get you like how she set up her portfolio, or how some of her programming friends set up their portfolio. Because unfortunately, I don't have the exact answer to that question. I saw a hand over here. Go for it.
Would you say having works that are actually published for people to like consume and like play would be good for a portfolio? Like,
Oh, 100%. If people have played your game, that is much better than a game that only you've created and never showed anyone. Unless for some reason that game is like super stellar, but the fact that you put it out to people, like you're going to build those skills whether you like it or not, because people are going to give you feedback. It's going to make you question your choices. You're going to want to continue to iterate in order to make a better experience for people. Like that in itself would show me that like, hey, this person has at least a basic skill set of the skills I'm looking for, whether they like it or not. Especially if you like are selling your game, that just builds an entirely new skill set of like, hey, I had to learn how to price my game. I had to like go through this like marketing aspect, and that might be a skill set that like they're looking for, especially in like a AA or indie company where like people are responsible for wearing a lot of hats. They might be like, oh, this person has already released the game on the Steam market. They already have a familiarity of like how that works, and so their work is going to reflect that. Go for it. Finish it off.
building on that, so would like having multiple versions of the same game and having say feedback, and then you showing that you built on the feedback that you got, would that be good for a portfolio?
Yeah, 100%. No matter what you're doing, like whether it be code, art, or design, like 100% that is fantastic. Maybe in your portfolio, not just like show like the one game over and over again, but like be like, this is version 2.7 of my game, and then I can be like, oh, cool. Like, can I click on that and go to his like previous versions? And like, especially if you have like a blog post that's like, hey, these are the changes I did. Like, if I can access your change list, like that already tells me that you kind of already understand the game design process. We have a joke in game development, which is you're never happy with your work, because unfortunately in the creative industry, you're always going to try to improve something. When things get released, no one's happy about it. There's always things that we could have improved. There's always improvements we could have made, and that's just an unfortunate truth of the creative industry. You just one of the great things about working on a portfolio is that it shows us, hey, you know how to stop and when to stop. And that's probably going to be a topic that comes up, is like, why did you decide to stop here and not keep going? And like your answer is going to be invaluable to the people that are interviewing you. There was a hand over here. Go for it.
Yeah, my question is, were you hired solely on your portfolio, or did you also have to have an in, know someone at the same time?
So me specifically, I got hired because I had an in. My portfolio didn't really show off my skill set as a designer. Like I said, I had a very like stereotypical climb where I built my skills as a designer because I worked in the industry and I was interacting with the different designers. That's easier to do, but more of a time investment. If you want to just go in as whatever position you're going for, you need to have a strong portfolio showing your work. But yeah, mine was completely through an in. My interview process was easy because they were like, do you play games? Do you play these types of games? And I was like, yes. And they were like, cool, you're hired. You seem cool. That's fine. And I was like, cool. And then I literally just played a game for hours upon hours a day. So any other questions? Go for it.
So I'm asking for a friend who can make it. So he's working on like mixed adult / NSFW games. And he asked me if I can ask like how if you know how making NSFW games could affect future employment opportunities.
That is so dependent on the company and the person you're interviewing. I will say it's a risk. If you're using that as a portfolio piece, it's a risk. Because if I was doing that, that would crack me the fuck up. I'd be like, that's fucking amazing, we're hiring this guy. Other people might be like, that is so inappropriate, we're never hiring this guy. Especially, unfortunately, especially when it comes to like higher up people, usually those people are old and white. Like, don't quote me on that. Edit this out of but they just have a lot of those people tend to have more conservative viewpoints, and they're going to be part of the interview. If you go to like a more like indie company that's like more younger people, you might have a better like shot at having that seen as a legitimate portfolio piece. But a lot of the like older companies where you're going to be interviewed by like the leads who have like worked in the industry for like 30 years, they might not be quite as susceptible to like that kind of work. So I won't say it's not legitimate. You're still making a game. Hell, I've thought about doing it because I've seen so many of those puzzlers out there. I'm like, I wonder how much money I can make just by making like a match 3 that shows you boobs. Like, so curious. But it's a risk. And I think that's part of like the socials where you kind of have to learn the company culture. As long as he's not like a creep, like he's not like, yes, I love boobies when he comes to the interview. Yeah, he's probably fine. If he just seems like a normal put together guy and he's like, I made booby games because I needed to pay for my college tuition. Like, I would totally be fine with hiring that guy to work as a designer or artist or whatever. Probably artist, right? Like, anyways, yeah. Go for it.
Also, that's a friend, but it's not nearly as bad as the question. What's the best way to find jobs in the industry? I'm gonna add to this because it's like I'm assuming it's networking, but
finding jobs. I mean, there's like I think Gamma Sutra has like a link that you can go to where you can just look for all the jobs that are open. If you have an interest in a company, just go to their site and their career page. They have like a listing there. In terms of actually getting that job, yes, like having an invaluable. A lot of the jobs, a lot of people that get hired into positions at a company are because like, hey, we know this person. Like literally, we had an interview at my current company where someone flubbed the interview so bad that almost everyone on the team said we are not going to hire this dude. The person who was recently hired vouched for him so hard that the lead designer and the CEO gave him another chance in a one-on-one, saw that he had the skills and he would be a good fit for the position, that we hired him. So, like, yeah, unfortunately, having that in is so invaluable. It's really strong. But if you're just looking for a position that might be open, there are tons of resources on the internet that can help you find a job. I think there's another one called like Gamesmith, I think. I can't remember the exact website, but that one also has like a compilation of like a bunch of jobs that are available out on the market. Any other questions? Cool. Go for it.
One more. Best thing to put on a resume. I'm assuming slash portfolio.
I could not tell you one thing. Mostly because like depending on what position you're going for, it's going to be different. But honestly, a game. Post a game that you've worked on. If you're going for the games industry, put a game. If you're going for like the board game industry, like put a board game. If you're going for like, oh, I want to work at Wizards on Magic cards, post a Magic card that you made or a list of Magic cards that you made. Like, just show at least a piece of work of the industry that you are trying to apply to, that shows off your skill set. Go for it.
I have a question. It's kind of about the in. I've had like the inclination to like talk to some developers of games that I really, really love, and what do you think about people like randomly kind of reaching out over, I don't even know what site, but just to chat, I guess? Or are developers averse to just kind of like setting aside time?
It's, once again, so dependent on the developer. Obviously, I'm up here because I'm willing to reach out and help people. And if you had like specific questions about like mission design and like learning that kind of skill set, like that's why I put my email out here. You can try that. Some developers are going to be more likely to respond to you. I think Twitter is a great tool these days. When I was at Gearbox, like Twitter was like a key way of like interacting with developers. I don't know if that's still the case now, just because of the whole like Twitter sphere, but like people are able to like send direct messages to like developers and just be like, hey, I'm interested. What do I need to do to build my skill set? And as long as you're not like pushy.
And I'm not saying that necessarily like as an in, as
right.
Like no one likes to hear like, hey, like what can I do to get this job?
Right.
But just
Yeah.
like purely out of interest.
Right, I think that'd be great if you like sent me your work like over a period of time, and I was like, wow, this guy does really good work. The next time like an interview comes up, I might bring up like, hey, there's this guy I've been in contact with. I know he's a cool dude. I've seen the work that he's done, and it really applies to the game we're working on. Can we try interviewing him? And like, I know people who've gotten interviews before the like call for job openings have even gone up on the website because they already knew someone who was perfect for that position. So that's very possible. That is a hell of a shotgun approach because, like I said, you don't know that person. And man, it is really hard in writing to sound like how you speak because you don't have tones and inflections. When you're writing, you have a flat voice, and how someone reads that flat voice might be very different. So, like, I won't discount it unless everyone here starts doing it and it comes back to me, and I'm gonna have a lot of people really angry at me. But like, it's worth trying. At worst, like, you're just not gonna get a response. So, yeah, no problem. Any other questions? Go for it.
In regards to like people already in the industry, do you see like movement to and from like back and forth, or?
I mean, one of my reasons I went into, so the current company I'm working at is a smaller company of like 30 people versus the Gearbox of like 300, and that's just personal preference. Some people like being a very like master of their art, which is what you're going to get when you work for a large company. And I wanted to grow my skills in other aspects of design, which is why I was interested in working at a smaller company. And that's just going to be personal preference. I will also say the really nice thing about working at a large company is you get some awesome swag. Like Gearbox, every time they release a game, give you like little crystal cubes of like of solid glass cubes of the games you worked on. And I look at those and I'm like, that's cool. I don't really get that at High-Wire. Just smaller company, don't have as much investment. Like Gearbox, I would regularly get like Gearbox jackets. I got the collector's edition of Borderlands 3 for free. Big companies are great for swag. Like they're awesome. My fiance who works at Epic, like the Epic store has an employee like specific store, and she got all of these like really cool Fall Guys figurines for like a huge discounted price. And I was like, I'm so jealous, but I also never want to work in a large company again. So it's personal preference. They also tend to be more stable. They give better benefits than smaller companies usually. That's kind of the boring answer though. Go for it.
So if you don't want to work at a bigger company again, what dissuaded you from wanting to work in bigger?
Once again, personal preference. When you work at a larger company, you tend to be very specialized in what you're doing. I personally was just like, I don't want to only be focused on making missions for Borderlands. I want to do more scripting specific things. I want to build my technical skills. I want to learn more about like how blueprint scripting interacts with code, and have an opportunity to have more say in what I'm working on. In a larger company, you don't really get that. Unless, once again, you're like in that lead position or you're the creative shareholder. You're not going to get a ton of opportunity to be like, I think this mechanic is bad and we should change it to this. Because there's like 40 other people who have already voiced their opinions and they've already come to the decision that this is the way we should go. At a smaller company, there's less people, your voice is much larger. It feels more like you can make an impact and your feedback is more readily like available to the right people for them to like iterate upon. And I really liked that aspect. And I also like the fact that like I'm not just working on missions. I'm also doing systems design and I'm working in scripting, and I'm sometimes I'm like in the art assets because I need to change the collision set presettings on like certain like assets, and that really appealed to me because I felt like I was building my skills in a more like horizontal manner than a vertical manner. So that personally appealed to me. But once again, everyone's different. Some people are like, man, I fucking love making rocks all the fucking time. I'm the best goddamn rock maker in the world. And like those people thrive in larger companies. Anybody else? Go for it.
How is SGDA now compared to when you left it?
Say that again.
How is SGDA now compared to when you left it?
How much what I do know?
How is SGDA now compared to like when you left it?
Oh wow, y'all have gone huge. When I was in the SGDA originally, when 5 people came to our like meetings, we were like, oh my god, there's so many people. When like 10 people came to our meetings, we're like, oh my god, we're gonna have to find a new room. Like it was much smaller. It was also like before like the huge kind of industry boom. Like there's so many more people who are looking into getting into the industry, and tools that allow you to like make your own games have just become so much easier. Even back when I was in SGDA, there were almost no YouTube videos that showed you how to do like blueprint scripting to like make your own game. I can literally go on YouTube and be like, how do I make an inventory system in UE5? And someone will have a tutorial that they just made in their free time because they were interested in how it worked. So like those tools have become both a boon for y'all, but also y'all's like double-edged sword because everyone else is using that as well, which means they're also building those skills and they're also competing against you to get jobs from a shrinking pool, unfortunately. On the other hand, like it's great time to like be an indie developer, like make Flappy Bird, make $1 million and then just disappear off the face of the earth. Like just be like, fuck the haters. I have $1 million in my pocket. So like, I'll never have to work again. So like, you know, it depending on what you want to do, like there's benefits both ways. Anybody else? Cool. Like I said, if you have any other questions that come up about the industry, or like you're curious about things, or something you were too embarrassed to ask here for some reason, that guy wasn't. Like I don't know possibly what you could have asked that was more embarrassing than that. But feel free to send it here. I won't guarantee it'll be a timely manner, just because I'm working, so life. But yeah, if I don't answer you, just like ping me like once a week to just be like, hey, I had this question. Do you mind answering this question? Just be nice. I'm going to say right now, if you email me, I will email you back being like, you might want to work on your social skills. I would not have written it like this. I will be that person, just because that is the expectations I'm going to have when you send questions to me. And that is purely to help you. But yeah, send me questions. I'm an open resource for y'all. So cool.